Hey y'all, so this week we're talking about Dorothea Lange. She was an American photographer or photojournalist, and she was best known for photographing the Depression era, the way the lands were changing during the Dust Bowl, and how Japanese Americans were treated after Pearl Harbor. She was born in 1895 in Hoboken, New Jersey, and at a very, very young age, she actually contracted polio, which left her with a limp and other health problems later on in life, but she didn't let that stop her from traveling the world to take pictures and document history. Her most famous work comes from the 1930s or the Great Depression era, where many were left poor and homeless. She would follow these people or these migrant workers around and document their lives. She felt that it was important to show the world and help them understand the everyday hardships and struggles that American families had to deal with during this time. Her most famous photograph is actually the most printed photograph out of any in the world, so it is considered the most famous photograph in the world, and it's titled Migrant Mother. After looking at this photograph, you can probably understand why it was so important. Dorothea thought it was necessary to tell the world about this mother and her family's story, and now looking at it, you can learn a lot about her and her family, and you can feel exactly the same way that she felt in this photograph. It wasn't just the subject matter that made Dorothea Lange's pictures famous. She was brilliant at developing a composition. She used high contrast, or the difference between light and dark. You have the boy's eyes against the shadow of his hood, against the white or bright background. And she also used framing, so that means that she took strong lines and shapes to frame her subject matter. Notice the boy's hood makes a triangle frame around his face, drawing all the attention on him. You can see the use of contrast and framing in almost every photograph of hers. However, she also used the more important rule of thirds, which we've talked about before. Notice that this lady's face is about a third of the way down the paper, and her skirt in the bottom of the tent is about 2/3 of the way down the paper. Also pay attention to how the shading on the woman matches or mirrors the shading on the tent behind her, but her face stands out against the bright white sky. This picture does an amazing job of showing contrast and the relationship or the friendship between these two boys, and it still follows the rule of thirds. Take a second to see how well the focal points line up with the orange lines. The boys' faces, their hands, and even the position of their bodies matches this rule. So for this assignment, I want you to practice taking pictures of anything that's important to you, and you're going to upload them to Seesaw. I need at least one picture for this assignment, but you can submit more than one. Just keep in mind the rule of thirds. Even though you can't actually see these lines on your picture, you can guesstimate. So for example, if you're taking a picture of your cat, don't take a picture of the cat's face right in the middle. Try to move it off to the left side or to the right. In fact, the sweet spot for your pictures are where these lines meet. So if you divide your paper in thirds going down and thirds across, the areas in the red circles are where your focal point should be. And your focal point should be your things like your faces or what you want your audience to focus on. So going back, if I was taking a picture of my cat, I might wait to get a good positioning so that the cat's face, it might be on the sweet spot, while the rest of their body might be on another sweet spot. Now, it's okay in this type of photograph if you have a lot of negative space or a lot of blank space. One good rule of thumb, though, is to make sure your focus is in focus, meaning it's not blurry, and the rest of the space, the negative space, can be out of focus or it can be blurry, just as long as your subject matter is clear as day. Here is one more example. So you wouldn't want to take a picture of your house right in the middle of the page again. Remember, it's a good rule of thumb to move it off to the left or off to the right, and practice moving it up or down. So I'm drawing a horizon line at the bottom of the picture to show you that you can line up the horizon line also with these rule of thirds. And I have even placed the front door on the sweet spot. Now remember, because you can't actually see these lines or where they meet up, you have to imagine them. This will take some practice getting used to. So don't just take one photograph and then say you're done. Use your iPad to take several and submit your best work through Seesaw, the ones that are you're most proud of. Also, you get bonus points if you're using contrast or framing. So, for example, if you're taking a picture of your house, it might look really good in bright sunlight, so you get lots of contrasting shadows. Now, here's a photograph of my daughter that I love, but it didn't follow the rule of thirds, and there is a way to fix that. You can edit your photos to make it easier for you. And here's a pro tip. When you edit your photos, they do the line of thirds for you, so it makes it easier to see and position your subject matter. Now, I am super excited to see all of your wonderful photographs. However, if you do take pictures of people, make sure you get their permission or your parents' permission before you submit them to Seesaw. And it does not have to be of people. It can be pets, it can be a special toy, it can be anything that's important to you. I'm super excited to see your photographs.